Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. Not too much news when it comes to EVE Online. This week we do of course have the patch notes for the April release, mostly balance changes of course. And I would especially advise you to go and take a quick look at the EVE Updates website because CCP has changed things up there. We've got the details for the April release and then spring summer. Well, only two things so far on the radar, which is the 64-bit client. They're hoping to bring that this spring or this summer. Well, let's hope that they can manage to make it work perfectly by then. And then of course we have the changes, the redesign for the agency window, where, well, one aspect of it I personally am looking somewhat forward to. It is the changes to public fleets that should make them a lot more accessible. I might dabble in that if it works the way I expect it to work. Let's get started for the new Eden store then. Take a quick look at that. So still the Metamataria Exotica skins front and center. Then we've got the new Kai Neon skins. Those look absolutely amazing. Down here we've got those again as well. Any sales? Normally I think that gets a red tag. So we've got greens for new, some bundles, some hot items, but that is about it. So yeah, no big sales when it comes to the new Eden store. You can also see that I went down to 10,000 plex around because I sold my plex last week, around 20% of my plex last week for some profits. It just looks so good. So let's get into the actual market here. As always, we'll start with some plex and stuff, and that is going to be at let's say 2 minutes. 200, there we go. And yeah, I sold some plex, what I think would be at a pretty good price, and we can see here it was right around this peak that I managed my sale. To my surprise, I did undercut the sell price in Cheetah by just a little bit, but it was all picked up in a matter of seconds. So definitely right at the height of activity is where I managed to sell my plex. My plan was to keep an eye on it, and then if this week we would have a further increase in price, I would have considered that to be even more crazy than the last little jump here. Then I would have sold another 2,500 plex, and if it kept up like that up until I had none to sell anymore. But this really is looking like bubble behavior, especially here. The last two upswings here are so sharp that is just unsustainable. You know that this cannot keep going. At some point this is going to turn around, and here you can see in the last 4 or 5 days we have been going down on increased volume, so some major dumping must have been happening here as well. Let's take a quick look at the prices in Jita. So almost 4.1 million for the sellers, 4 million for the buyers. If we go to the player owned trade hubs, super narrow margin, 4,077,000 for the sellers, and then the buyers go up to just above 4 million ISK. So here we have a little bit of a closing of the gap. There was a pretty big gap last week between the sellers in Cheetah that went up to I think 4.6 million or something like that, and then the sellers in the player owned trade hubs that stopped at maybe 4.4. Not exactly sure if that's correct, but it was a pretty sizable margin, I think, speaking to the fact that we were indeed in bubble territory. Now, we're still there. I still think the price is very high, and I must give the same warning that I gave last week. Things tend to go up, especially when it comes to plex, a lot higher than I always think it could. So I think here this looks like the turnaround, but I could be completely wrong on that, and I would not be surprised by another resurgence of the plex prices to an even higher point. I would consider it a crazy high point, but it is entirely possible. The markets are not entirely rational, as we can often see in the plex market, and when it goes to new highs, it does tend to overshoot by quite a bit, which makes for a nice place to sell, of course. Next up, let's take a look at the multiple pilot trade certificates, which for me are a bit of a canary for the plex market, because of course it has one of the same functions, which is to allow a character to actively train, to have an active skill training queue. And so here we can see we are basically flat with at the tail end also the median daily prices going down in the last 4 or 5 days. Volumes are still abysmal. That is because we have extremely high prices. Of course, almost 1.9 billion for the sellers, and then 1.8 almost for the buyer. So super expensive still, but compared to plex, it is already a different story, and plex needs to go back down in order to get in line with 1.9 billion for 1 month of training time. Next up, we have the skill extractors. Same pattern, of course, super tightly related to plex, because you've got this one-on-one transaction that you can make. Went up to 510 million ISK on 1 day for the median daily price. 5-day moving average went very close to 500 million, but now here at the tail end, same thing. You can see is go back down, and here a couple of increased volumes on that turnaround. Prices did go quite crazy. So here sellers are down to 460 million ISK, which is still very expensive. And then we can see buyers, whoa, 458 for the first one here in station. Must have, yeah, the range is not set to one jump, and so basically this is the price: 458 for the sellers, 455, 458 for the buyers. No margin whatsoever, but at least we are down a little bit. Now the no margin is probably the bad news. Looking at the volumes, it is still lower than the sell orders, so we should be okay. But that is where you feel like, well, this could still go either way, because people are still willing to buy at these extremely high prices. If sellers are a little bit patient, they just wait for that to shoot back up, and you can see that 465 and up is not that far away, and the supply coming in is not that major just yet. So it's gonna be interesting to see in the upcoming weeks. I think if we do have a peak here, that will turn out to be the 1 year high, the peak price, or will we still have a second bounce that then might just blow through the previous record. Next up, we have the skill injectors. Here are the large skill injectors, still climbing to an all-time high, a 1 year high, 950 million ISK. So 956 million for the sellers, 943 for the buyers. Shows lots of demand for skill points themselves, as plex have turned around a little bit. As plex have turned around a little bit, and the large skill injectors are continuing on their ascent. Well, it's gotta be skill point demand to make the difference. Although again, markets are not that rational. It's never just one explanation, but seeing these large skill injectors reach another 1 year high here, I would have the very same reflex. If you see this line, it's unsustainable, although we've been going since November, where we had a nice prolonged bottom. So you could have bottomed at around 700 million ISK here. Now you can sell them for almost a billion ISK, but this is not sustainable. This is a lot of ISK flowing into the market, and especially the latest increase is even faster than where we thought we would stop at 900 million ISK. And so this again really starts to feel like bubble behavior. If you have investments in large skill injectors, I would highly consider selling those for the profits right now. For the small skill injector, we've got the same thing, except there was hesitation at 190 million, but we're just blowing straight past that. Today's average price is above 190 million. Sellers coming in at 193, buyers are coming in at 186 million. Yeah, for the raw skill points, that is a pretty hefty price, despite the weekend that we just had like a week ago, where you got free SP. So demand remains super high for the skill points. And then after that, we still have the daily alpha injector that is starting to go back down. So this is the first one, again, in my opinion, canary in the coal mine. If you get the large scale injectors continuing this ascent, but here now for the daily alpha injectors, we can also see the turnaround together with plex. I think it's just a matter of time before the plex decrease also gets calculated into the large scale injectors. But a second bounce might still change things. I would be very surprised, but it's not impossible. So here daily alpha injectors going back down towards 70 million ISK, sellers coming in at 72.5 million ISK, and the buyers at 66.5 million ISK. So again, decently narrow margin, but the first signs of a turnaround are here as well for the daily alpha injectors. Let's see what this means for the minerals at 9:35. And we'll start as always with titanium, which, well, very, very flat, just above 4.5 ISK on the chart. Hardly any volatility in the last couple of weeks here. Why are these median daily prices looking all over the place? I think it's normally that, well, depending on most sellers have the patience to put up a sell orders and buyers actually grab them, then you've got a high price. And if the opposite happens, you've got impatient people dumping more titanium to buyers than people grab from sellers, you'll have that median daily price be below the chart. But you can see the 5-day moving average super flat, just above 4.5 ISK. And unfortunately, sellers are starting to go down in price as well. 4.5 for the first one, 451 for the first decently large sell order, and then buyers coming in at 442. The real question is, will people be willing to keep dumping titanium below 4.5 ISK? They seem to be quite hesitant, and so perhaps a bit of a bounce is still possible, because the really big ones, 1.8 billion, is at 465 and 1.5 billion as well. So if this gets snagged up, we might just see a little bit of a bounce in the price and keep the chart above 4.5 ISK. That's my hope, but there is no guarantee, of course. The rebalance of the Rorcal might just make that happen though. Next up, we've got the pyrite chart, which is staying above 3.8 ISK. So here we had a nice little comeback. We went down to less than 3.3 ISK, very close to 3 ISK on a day, in fact. Went back up towards 4 ISK. The market is not willing to go above that, and eventually you have to give some ground back. But nice little bounce again. We're staying between 3.8 and 4 ISK. 386 for the sellers, 372 for the buyers. The volumes are still very big though. 1.6 billion, 1.8 billion, 1.4 billion, another 1.4 billion. All of these being sold for less than 4 ISK is going to keep the chart in check. No way that we are going above 4 at this point. Next up, we've got our Mexalon chart. Also a little bit of a bounce, pretty nice, went above 60, but how long does that last? Not very long. This was definitely the pattern in the mineral market in general. Whenever we made some gains, well, there was plenty of supplies, plenty of reserve stocks out there that were willing and willing to try and sell at those slightly higher prices, which meant, of course, that we had a very sharp decrease right after that. And we're in the same spot here. Mexalon back down to 59.38. You can also see, I think if we go to 61, you've got, well, no, actually the biggest volumes are still at 59.44 as well. I thought we'd see bigger volumes at like just above 60. But that is not the case. So sellers down to 59.38, buyers at 58.04. Bit of pressure again on the Mexalon. It is basically still hovering in that 55 to 60 range where it's been for quite a while. 1 year low point, not that great a price, unfortunately, for Mexalon. Next up, we've got Isogen. Same story, except it had a very long, not so sharp, very slow increase in price from around mid-November to, I would say, mid-March, maybe the second half of March. Went up from 15 to 19 ISK, but now people see this increased price and they try to take advantage of that. So volumes increase all of a sudden, causing the price to drop sharply. Someone spoiled the party, basically. We've got 16.4 ISK now for the sellers and 16 ISK for the buyers. That's a sharp drop off, but we're staying clear of 15 ISK at this point. No new 1 year low points. And then we have Noxium, which, well, that's a bit of a surprise to me again. We did go down to less than 300 ISK, and I thought we would stay there sustainably because of the general vibe in the mineral market. But nope, look at that, little jump back up to 317. So that would definitely again be my focus. If you can find, can't really find anything good to mine, like from moon mining in HiSec, try to find some Noxium sources. 312 for the sellers, 296 for the buyers. Average price above 300 ISK. It's still, historically speaking, not a great price, but if you look at the 1 year strength of Noxium, it's pretty much the only HiSec mineral or mineral that's available in HiSec that has maintained its price over the years. So very nice little comeback here, a bit of a surprise, but we are staying in the 300 to 325 range for Noxium for now. Then we have Zydrine, that is also now stable at the price that it's found, just above 500 ISK. So it's 519 for the sellers, biggest volumes, yeah, 519.04, etc. Again, this is the typical amounts that you would get for some moons: 4.4 million, 3.4 million, 8.4 million. It's quite decent, all of them competing with each other. Then the buyers are just below 500 discs, and the average here is staying just above that. Very, very stable because, of course, of the high SIG supplies, in my opinion. Then we got Megasite diving back down a little bit at the tail end, but trying to stay above 500 disc. Sellers at 516, buyers at 495. Basically the same pattern as Zydrine, except the volumes are a bit lower. When it comes to Megasite, it is a bit more lower in volumes compared to Megasite as well, when it comes to its composition in ores normally. And then finally we've got Morphite that is trying to come back to 8,000 disc after reaching a 1-year low point, and we saw this big volume spike here causing the increase in price. People did try to take advantage of that super low Morphite price. So now Morphite is selling at 7,913 ISK, still below 8,000 ISK. That is, historically speaking, still a bargain. 7,700 for the buyers is not bad, but you could have gone a lot lower about a month ago. So here you either did, in my opinion, or you wait it out and you see if we do have more pressure coming in again and if we have a second opportunity or not. After the minerals, we are moving on to the PI category at 1610. I am trying to make good time because I'm a little bit worried about my internet connection, although I've not seen anything weird since the last Eve talk. And you know, Eve talk does tend to be around 50 minutes, and so we're quite at risk of another disconnect. Let's hope it doesn't happen. And let's move on to these PI materials then. Broadcast nodes. Ooh, that is interesting. Here a little bit of speculation, and potentially if I'd have to gamble on a story here, I would say the Triglavian construction might be part of that. So it turns out that this is not a dreadnought that they're building, but something much bigger, and perhaps people came to the conclusion that it might be structure related. Who knows what we'll be able to build. Gates to Triglavian space rather than to Jovian space, new space, I don't know. To me, if you look at these patch notes again in April, it's rebalancing, it's some changes, there's nothing too big on the radar. I do think that CCP is basically working hard on, well, what a lot of people would call a Jesus feature, but on something pretty big for the game. I'm starting to get that vibe because we are getting some maintenance patches for quite a while. No big news, but you do have these little story in-game tidbits that look like we might get a nice bombshell announcement at some point. And perhaps some people are speculating that the Triglavian construction is tied to structures, which might just mean a lot of demand for advanced PI materials. Let's see if it's across the board or not, but here for broadcast nodes, 2.2 million for the sellers, 2.1 million for the buyers, and a sharp uptick in the price here. In fact, a daily average of 2.5 million yesterday, I think. 5.4, yep, yesterday, which is kind of crazy. Next up, we have the construction blocks, also back up to 12,000 disc here, so back towards its average finally, 12,100 almost, in fact, for the sellers, 11,100 for the buyers. So as a result, we can clearly see that the sellers are winning out now, so demand is increasing, and we're back at practically an average price for consumer blocks if we look at this full 1-year chart. Then we get consumer electronics also managing to climb its way back to 13,000 disc, 13,300 in fact for the sellers, 12,800 for the buyers. So nice work to get back to almost an average. 13,300 would be around here on the chart. And if you look at this 1-year chart, we are there again, although we started a little bit higher. Admittedly, I would call 13,500 the actual average, but perhaps over the course of the last year or so, enough supplies came online in PI to cause the average price to just go down just a touch. So this is a touch below the all-time average, I would say, but we're definitely getting to a more normal price if we look at the full 1-year chart. Then for fuels, of course, that's That correction is continuing after reaching 16,000 disc. We're now trying to land at 12,000, just below that for the sellers, and 11,700 for the buyers. Still a respectable price, still an above average price, but the bubble part is over. Here we've got the same story. Definitely look at the volatility of price. Something like this in the coulons, when we go from 12,000 disc to 15,000 disc in a matter of a week or so, it's unsustainable. At some point you are going to correction, so this is absolutely a nice time to sell. It's usually a correction. Sometimes there are logical explanations for such sharp increases, but yeah, this was a little bubble here in coulons. Was nice to take advantage of that, especially because coulons are so easy to produce. And now we've got still a price above average for this fuel-related PI material. Enriched uranium, same thing. Although the increase in price was not as sharp, this is still a little bit of a bubble that we could spot. And we're now landing above 14,000 disc. Yeah, 14,400 for the sellers, 14,000 for the buyers. Still an above average price, but again, the bubble has been deflating. Integrity response draws next. Okay, there must be something to the structure related announcements, I think, because this one is sharply up as well. Went up to 3 million ISK, and it is 3 million ISK for the sellers, 2.7 million for the buyers, so the market is emptying out of that. I think that there is either an announcement that I missed or that there is speculation on the triglavian stuff happening. Mechanical parts, again, small little bubble here, 11,000 disc, back on its average price, I would say. 11,250 for the sellers, 10,800 for the for the buyers. So that's an okay price, not above average anymore, but also that's that same pattern in the fuel-related PI materials. Nuclear reactors, ooh, nice sharp increase all of a sudden. That's what we've missed for a very long time. 86,000 on the lower end, 110,000 for the on the high end. Is this an opportunity? Well, 107,000 for the sellers, 96,000 for the buyers. Perhaps it's a small opportunity. If you bought really low, I would say below 90k, you could try to sell or be patient. This is the first time in a while that we're actually seeing volatility increase for nuclear reactors. And then if we keep in mind what's happening in the advanced PI materials, there might be a bit of a link here that makes for interesting times in the future as well. Organic mortar applicators show some violent swings here as well. Tried to go back down here to 1 million ISK, but now sellers are at 1.2 million, buyers at 1.1 million. Not as sharp an increase, but you can see on these volumes that something is definitely happening in the advanced PI market again. Robotics slowly edging back down to less than 100,000 ISK, 100,000 for the sellers, 96,000 for the buyers. A bit of pressure here, but again, if we look at this 1-year chart, touch above average still. Self-harmonizing power cores went down to 1.9 million. Now, I called this one a buy opportunity several times, so I'm not that surprised to see the investors move in and bring the price back to 2 million ISK. But here, that second volume spike bring the price back to 2.1 million for the sellers and 2 million for the buyers is a bit of a surprise. So we're back to the average price for self-harmonizing power cores in very short order. Basically 1 day action or 2 days of action have caused us to renormalize that price. Superconductors back down to 12k, which is still an okay price. In fact, sellers are still at 12,650, buyers at 12,000 ISK, so nothing too crazy here. Again, might be seen as a little bubble from 12 to 14,000, but the average 12,500 sellers are still there. Test cultures went to a 1-year low, less than 7,000 ISK. Definitely an investment opportunity. You can see that some people did indeed see that, and increased volumes are there. Bring the price back to 7,200 for the sellers, but buyers still at 6,700. You still have a chance to grab test cultures for an all-time, well, I think a 1-year low for sure, at less than 7,000 ISK. And then finally we get the wetware mainframes. Again, volumes nothing too crazy, but you can clearly see that we are back up in price here. 2.4 million for the sellers, in fact almost 2.3 million for the buyers. Definitely a big uptick this week in advanced PI materials. If you have more information on that uptick, because it is across the board and some of them are quite violent, definitely let me know what you think is the reason for this increase in price, because this is well, something that I was expecting to happen at some point, but only when there is some concrete information on more structure development from CCP. So interesting stuff. Moving on to our advanced moon materials at 2430. Let's take a look at those crystalline carbonites. Slightly up, but again from a very low point of around 150, so 155 for the sellers, 155 for the buyers. No margin whatsoever, slightly above bottom price. Not much to say here. Ferrite carbide last week, it looked like a no-brainer to buy. Well, look at that, we're going even lower for ferrite carbide. This is that same pattern, but then on the lower end of the price that I also often see in plex. I constantly think, well, this is it, you know, 1 year low point, been there for about a month, can't go any lower than that. Yep, we actually do a slight leg down, so it's now 137 for the sellers and 123 for the buyers of ferrite carbide. 1 year low point yet again. This is why I do always tell people to be very careful with the volumes. Don't go too crazy there. Have the opportunity to buy a second time so that you can actually grab that lowest possible price. Next up, the nope, not this, but the titanium carbide also went back to 200 ISK, so pretty nice little comeback back to an average price, but that's not the last volumes, actually decreasing the price, so big dumping here, bring the price back down from 200 to 167, 68 ISK for the sellers, 162 for the buyers. Yeah, big pullback for the price. Back to a less than average price, still clear from the bottom though. And then we have tungsten carbide, same thing, nice little comeback to 225, but doesn't last that long. We are already on our way back down to 200, 205 for the sellers, 188 for the buyers. Pretty large margin, so I think tungsten carbide is set to continue the slide back to a less than average price. Let's then take a look at those metamaterials. Photonic metamaterials, well, that's interesting. Increase in price to 22.5. Yeah, nope, it's already back down. So this is just a bit more like an anomaly. The 5-day moving average is a bit more accurate. I think sellers are at 18,800 ISK, buyers are at 18,000 ISK. Basically a bit of an increase in price on volumes, so must have been some position taken, which if you look at this chart makes a lot of sense. We were below 17,500 ISK for a little bit, so we've got increased volumes driving the price back to 20,000 ISK, something like that, and then the dumping for the better price is already happening in the last 24 hours, driving us back down to 19,000 ISK. So this will very quickly stay in this less than average range. Plasmonic metamaterials next went up to 22.5 K, back down to a less than average price though, 19,600 for the sellers, 18,200 for the buyers. Again, pretty nice margin. It shows that there are not that many buyers. You really, I think, have to wait for the right opportunity to snag them at the best price possible, which is what most people seem to be doing. Non-linear metamaterials landing at 25,000 ISK. That's actually pretty respectable, I think. 25,100 for the sellers, but again 25,400 for the buyers. Pretty healthy margin, lots of room for a continued downturn to a less than average price. And then we have the terahertz metamaterials, same thing, a bit of spiky behavior, but the trend in this week is definitely back down in price. 23,500 for the sellers, 22,400 for the buyers. Well, it must be said, outside of the ferrite carbide, we don't have a pronounced 1 year low point, so I would be very careful with investing at this point in the market. Let's take a look at the other products, then fermionic condensates. Last couple of days, a bit of pressure as it tried to get back to 100,000 ISK again. It's 97,000 for the sellers, 94,000 for the buyers. Then we have ferrogel, same thing, trying to get back to a more average price, but a bit of pressure in the last couple of days or the last week or so, but definitely less pronounced than some of the other metamaterials and some of the carbonites. So ferrogel, 48,000 for the sellers, 45,000 4,500 for the buyers. You know, definitely trying to settle at a closer to average price, I would say. Fuller rights, that's not good news. Heading back for 900 isk, 954 yeah, for the sellers, 931 for the buyers. So well shy of 1000 isk, obviously below average. Hypersynaptic fibers also languishing on that low price. There's really not that much to say for these. Last couple of days, 5000 isk. Apparently, if they are already below average, we've got a pretty flat line. If they try to creep back towards that average, you've got a bit of a downturn again for that. Phenolic composites, that one though, 1 year low point yet again. Look at that sharp decline. Now here, same thing, something like that. It's not sustainable. At some point we are going to land, and that's where you actually want to buy, of course. Phenolic composites selling for 1,650 ISK, buyers at 1,540. So I think try to grab them below 1,600, and you've got a good deal. Looking at this chart again, this is not sustainable. We're not going to continue on this downtrend. In fact, in the last couple of days, you can see the hesitation in the market. So try to time it correctly, and again, always be careful with the volumes, but this looks like a no-brainer to me. So I think I should definitely put my money where my mouth is, especially now that I got some extra ISK from the plex sale. Ceramic fibers also on the downtrend, went to 450, stayed there for a while, but nope, not sustainable. 427 for the sellers, 418 for the buyers. I'd personally be looking for less than 400. So yeah, phenolic composites and Fernite carbides 1 year low points. All the others average, but also under pressure to less than average prices at the moment, which is normal. We've got a very quiet nullsec. I think with the rebalance changes though, things might heat up again in nullsec, so that is perhaps a good reason to try and take your positions on time. Next up, our Tech 2 ships coming in at 31.15. Let's go. Here is the Aries, a slight uptick to 27.5 million, but still super stable at the less than average price. 27.7 million for the sellers, 25.6 for the buyers. Not much to say in the Interceptor here. For the Basilisk, trying to slowly creep its way back to 250 million ISK. It is 246 for the sellers, 217 though for the buyers. Pretty large margin again, showing a bit of a lack of actual demand in the ship, I think. So no third spike, I should say, to 300 million, which in the last couple of months did give us some nice trade opportunities. So looks like we're quieting down a bit in the Basilisk market. Not sure about the others. Cerberus going back down sharply, back to less than 250 million, 245 for the sellers, to 33 for the buyers. If this has more momentum, again, an unsustainable drop like that has nice potential, but I would need to see it go a little bit lower again, head closer to 200 million on the buyers, which is still a while away, and that's where you could make a nice purchase to try and take advantage of a possible spike again. The Crow heading to less than 30 million ISK, but actually pretty slowly and sustainably. Almost 30 million for the sellers, 27 for the buyers. Not much to say. The Guardian, unfortunately, again, a spike that doesn't go up high enough. We did go up to almost 250 million, but you'd need to see 280 to 300 to really take advantage of one of the bottom prices. So here, again, a lowering of volatility is what I'm seeing. 234 million for the sellers, 219 for the buyers. I think pretty normal price for the Guardian. The Heretic, and are we? Oh, okay. Heretic coming back. Okay, heading back for 80 million ISK. So I've been telling you guys for a couple of months that trying to grab a Heretic for around 60 million would be a good idea, and now we're selling that for 75 million on a complete lack of availability. Still 60 million for the buyers, so you gotta be fast if you want to make this twitch trade. Otherwise, well, you can still try to actually grab them for 60 million ISK. So it's not that sustainable an increase in price, I don't think. I think we will go back down in price pretty quickly, but it's a small sell opportunity to take a 15 million profit on the Heretic. Personally, I would have a bit more patience and wait for an actual big battle to cause a real price spike, and still try to grab Heretics at around 60 million ISK. Next up, we've got the Hounds going back down to less than 30 million ISK here, 29 for the sellers, 27.4 for the buyers. Again, I would have a bit more patience, look for that 25 million buy order for the frigates, Tech 2 frigates. I think that's where the bargains are at. Then we've got the Ishtar after reaching a 1-year low point pretty much at 220. A little spike up, unfortunately not enough to really make any big trades here. 229 for the sellers, 221 for the buyers. It's still well below average, pretty cheap Ishtars at the moment. We do see a big volume increase, so I would say in all likeliness a couple of big entities stocked up on their Ishtar fleets as they saw the price go down like that. Manticore staying below 35 million, but that's around its normal average price. 34 for the sellers, 29.3 for the buyers. Decent margin, and 29.3, if you look at that, is pretty much below the entire chart, but I would wait for a bit more momentum on a downturn to actually try and grab them. It's going to be very difficult to do at this point. Then we've got the Munin going back down actually. On the chart, we're looking at 240 million on average, 255 actually still for the sellers, 228 for the buyers. So again, really big margin between the two. I'd look to maybe buy a couple of Munins at 228, was it? Yep, 228. You could try it, but you're really gambling on this being an actual doctrine in the Imperium still, which is the reason why this was added actually to the Tech 2 ships. Nemesis, nice little spike up to 34 million, but really only on a single day. So here we have back down to 31 million for the sellers, 28 million for the buyers. It's basically too late to still be selling the Nemesis that you bought for less than 25 million, hopefully at around February. I know I bought a couple of them, but yeah, this is not my sell point. I think I want to spike like this. Try and get it back up above 35 million ISK for that clear 10 million profit on the Nemesis trade is what I'm looking for personally. Oneros back up in price a little bit as well. Nice little volume spike, but look at the price response, almost nothing. So the Oneros 216 for the sellers, 179 still for the buyers. Still a buy opportunity. Sure, it's below the entire chart pretty much, but the volumes are the real problem, of course, in the Oneros. Then we've got the Purifier, flat above 30 million ISK. There's not much to say here. 32 million for the sellers, 29 for the buyers. Then we've got the Saber, that could be interesting. Still low as well. Staying just above 65 million, 67 for the sellers, but 62.4 for the buyers. I would still say, if you haven't done so, look at what's happening with the Heretic here, and know that the Saber, in my opinion, is even more popular when it comes to the Interdictor. So as a result, yeah, this is a nice opportunity. 62.4 for the buyers. You can up that price a little bit, try to grab them below 65 million. You're below the entire chart. It makes a lot of sense to try and grab one, which is not easy, but if you're aggressive enough and you price your buy orders right, I do think there's a bargain to be made there. Then we have the Scimitar, little uptick again, so less than average, not much to say. 213 for the sellers, 207 for the buyers, narrow margin on that low price. And then the Stiletto is back down as well after a spike up to 34 million ISK, back down to 28 for the sellers and 27 for the buyers. So the Tech 2 ships are mostly still below average. I think that's normal in today's market, but yeah, some opportunities. I would still say that the Saber is that long-term opportunity. It's going to be very difficult to actually grab. And then my favorite are still the stealth bombers, I would say, because they show most of that volatility, which we like, of course. Let's move on to our Tech 3 ships coming in at 38.20. Like that. Here is the Confessor that went up last week, and as expected doesn't last too long. Goes up to 42.5 million on the chart, back down to 40 million. Sellers are still at 42.5. That's a bit of a surprise, but we do see 55, 79, another 25 here. Slight increase in the volumes, a bit more competition on the sellers, with buyers still at 37 million. I think we will drive the price back towards 40 million in pretty short order. Next up, we've got the Hecate, which is back up. Oof, that's actually pretty nice. That's actually trade almost almost trade-worthy increases in price here. So sellers coming in at 47 million, buyers are at 44 million ISK, volumes 29, well, a bit more here again with the 179, still keeping the price in check at some point at around 46 million, but that's a pretty sharp increase in price again, and then the volume response in the last 24 hours seems to be there as well. Interesting. Tactical destroyers above 40 million, but decent volumes that try to take advantage of that price so far. The Jackdaw went up to 50 million almost, is now on its way back down. 43 million for the sellers, 37 million for the buyers, and it is more popular, so we have one seller of 92, but other than that, in the last 24 hours, it's definitely a little bit lower in volumes, although keeping everything in mind, 30, 92, another 13, it's pretty much in line. Well, no, there's definitely more Hecates and there's definitely more Confessors as well. So the Jackdaw under pressure a little bit. I think the most popular tactical destroyer at the moment is under pressure on not too many volumes. So I would say that's good news for people that don't want to see overproduction. And then finally we've got this Svepel that is slowly edging its way back to 40 million ISK, and that is very good news also to see. If people are worried about overproduction, this I think is very good news. So we're at 40 million for the sellers, 35 million on the buyers. You can see nothing new coming in. And so what this means is that this is not just like reserves that are being brought to the market or something like that. No, this is people saying, why would I make Svepels and bring Svepels to the market at less than 40 million ISK when I can take that same industry slot and make some Confessors or make some Hecates or make some Jackdaws. Well, Jackdaws maybe not right now, but yeah, make some Hecates and Confessors, sell those at well over 45 million ISK or well over 40 million ISK. You get more bang for your buck, and that is where those volumes come from. They come from the Svepel market. There's nothing new here. So I think that's really good news. When it comes to suspecting that there is no overproduction at the moment and that we are in a pretty healthy market where the more popular ship actually goes up in price, and then you get production responses driving the price a little bit back down, giving some breathing room to the other ships to go back up in price. So I feel like this is actually really good news for a quite stable and a good, healthy tactical destroyer market so far. Good news for wormhole space, I would say, because that means that you've got a nice place to make that ISK, and you've got the right market to do so. Unlike, I would say, minerals that have been crashing down for so long that it might feel very discouraging to constantly see your ISK per hour go back down. Here, production of Tech 3 ships, so wormhole space stuff, looks to actually be a lot more stable. Next up, we've got the cruisers. We've got Legion under pressure again, heading for less than 160. Okay, still 172 though for the sellers and 147 for the buyers, which means that, well, buyers are winning out from time to time. People are willing to dump some Legions for around 147 million ISK. We also have a big volume spike. Are we seeing that here? Not really. So I would say that this is a strong indication of, no idea actually. How the hell do you explain such a big volume spike 2 days ago and no price response and nothing really visible on the market? I'm not sure. This is a weird one. Could be a regional thing, but I think the chart should be in the same range, which is only for Jita. So kind of a weird one. Next up, we've got the Loki. Went down to less than 200 million ISK, jumped back above that, now back below that. So here we're talking 190 million for the sellers, 171 for the buyers, and 1434.40. Other than that, quite low, so this seems quite healthy. I didn't really check that. Legion maybe a bit low in volumes here actually. So on this decreased price though, that's again normal. Who's gonna produce Legions when you have to sell them for 170 million when you can try to produce Lokis and try to sell them for 200 million? So, and this is also where we get a bit more volume and a bit more competition in the last 24 hours, which is driving the price back down, by the way. Then we've got the Proteus, quite stable at 180. It is the least popular one, so here we have 26 as the first sell order, but other than that, it is quite low in volumes, but it's also low in price at 174 to 175, 162 for the buyers. So here we got a very stable market in the least popular Tech 3 ship, I would say, and then the Tengu is stable at 180, 180 and volume 17, 20, also pretty low, but here another 26, so in the last 24 hours actually quite a lot of sell orders with 75 as well, but nothing too crazy here again. So very interesting tech tree market, but again, I would say that this is quite in line. The Legion going down for a couple of months here, and then we've got production stalling. You're not seeing any new sellers coming in, which is, well, putting some pressure on the Loki, because we've got some new Lokis coming in, putting some pressure on the Tengu, because those are coming in again, but driving those prices back down and giving the Legion, in my opinion, a chance to go back up in price a little bit. Just this one volume spike is kind of weird. Don't really know how to explain that. I should expect that to be in line below 100, but for some reason lots of them traded hands. Maybe it was like an in-alliance trade or something like that. Kind of a weird one. But yeah, the general vibe in the tech tree market is basically that it's healthy. There is no real signs of oversupply. And we actually have this healthy balancing of production, switching to the more expensive ship, giving some breathing room to the others, etc. I feel like that's a very nice market and very good news for Wormhole Space if you're looking at like a stable income. Well, tech tree ship production seems to be pretty good for that, with, well, stable income on average, with some opportunities here and there, of course, as well. And then for the extra product this week at 45.35, we're just gonna browse through some implants. I think that could be interesting because CCP is going to come out with some new implants as well. So let's take a quick look. Ah, man, yeah, that's just, there's so many of them that it's not too good, too easy. But for the implant slots for the attribute enhancers, I think that down here you've got stuff like the standard. Look at that, pretty low at the moment. Standard is 4 points. I think lots of people would fly that. Currently going for 20 million ISK. That feels quite affordable, to be honest. Then we've got the improved, also obviously pretty low at the moment, trading well below average and sometimes even at 1 year low points. And that's for the 5 points, currently selling for 106 million, bars below 100 million. That actually feels a lot more affordable, interesting. And then we've got the basic, I think, is that the 3 points? Yeah, that is the 3 points. Same pattern, definitely below average, looking at super cheap prices. Less than 9 million is for the sellers, 8 million for the buyers. So that's for implant slot 1. Let's see if it's across the board. So again, we'll be looking at a standard. Went to a 1 year low point of 18 million ISK. It's back up to 20.5, but we are obviously still trading these very cheaply. Then for the improved, staying just above 100,000 ISK, but sometimes trades do happen below that. So again, obviously a pretty low price for these. And then I'll be looking at the basic, I think. Also same pattern. You can see the average price normally 9 to 10 million, now trading 8.8 to 7.8 million, obviously below average. So that's pretty interesting. Quickly take a look at just those +4s, those standards and improved. Same pattern, right? Normally 21 million, now trading below 20 million. And here normally 115 million, something like that, now trading just above 100 million. Now we get implant slot 4. Just click on that, of course. We get the standard again, same thing, 21, 22 million, down now to even 19 million ISK. So here we do have some speculation happening on these really low prices. And then for the improved, same pattern again. For the longer term, well, always dangerous, to be honest, for these attribute enhancers, because at some point I think CSP is just gonna rip that out and make everyone train at the same speed. This is basically something that is mostly for skill point farmers at the moment. We've got the standard social adaptation, went to a 1 year low point of less than 19 million ISK. It's working its way back towards 21 million. So, but the same pattern is there again. Look at the improved one. Normally 115 million ISK, but now trading just above 100 million ISK. So that's it for the attribute enhancers. Let's see if we find anything interesting in the skill hardwiring. Armor implant. Man, this is just so difficult to really do. But we'll take a quick look at some of these. That seems around average, but you can see on charts like this, you can see that just not traded enough to make any sense. So we need to find something like this that's a little bit better. All right, actually trading a bit above average for this Noble Repair System. That's a terrible chart. And then this one, Inherent Implants Noble Repair System. Average price 150 million ISK, went down to 130 and is still below average. Terrible charts. Around average. It's very difficult to really find anything because there are just so many implants of this kind. Collide Drone Tuner. First half of the year above 50 million ISK, second half below 50 million ISK again. Overmind pretty damn flat. What else we get for the drone implants? Nice little spike at the tail end here, went up to 300 million ISK from a normal price of 100 million. Okay. For the Bumblebee drone tuner, and then the yellow jacket also trading decently high, I would say. Shields could be interesting. Let's see if we can spot those. It's actually a decent amount of them. Above average. Bad charts. Little spike at the tail end. Interesting. The Zainu Gnome Shield upgrades. Definitely trading for a nice price at the moment. Terrible charts. This one then again trading below average, I would say. And here another terrible chart. Implant slot 7. Nice little spike, but not a great chart. A bit above average, not much to say. Alright, shields do seem to be quite popular on some of them. The 702, the 701 definitely up in price. And now we've got the 705 down in price, and the 706 around average. 705, let's take a quick look at that. 5% shield capacity increase is actually down in price. Still 130 million, it's still quite expensive, but it does look like those are trading well below average. Interesting. Let's see if we've got the same pattern here. So that's just a bad chart, I would say. Average, average, average. Nah, average on this one. Yeah, just in plan slot 8. Not enough trading happening there to really spot anything. Implant slot 9. Also kind of bad, except here again, shield operations, minus 5% on the recharge rate. Look at that, normally 145 million, I would say, currently trading for around 130 million. So definitely a bit cheaper. Anything else? Missile implants could still be interesting, I would say, in general, below average, a bit above average. And the bad charts. CPU efficiency. I'm not really sure. That's a pretty big list, of course. So that may not have been the best one, because some of them are just not traded. And then others, this one for instance, cruiser missile snapshot, definitely a bit of volatility at the tail end, but trading below average. Now let's again look at the 605. Yeah, look, 150 normally, currently selling for 135 despite the low availability, and that's the 5% again. Okay, general trend, 5%ers seem to be trading a bit below average at the moment. Very interesting. So general vibe, all right, for implants, I would say we're trading a bit below average, especially in the attribute enhancers, +4s, +5s, and +3s are actually trading decently low, quite affordable at the moment. But keep one thing in mind, of course, is that CCP might at some point, I think, do something about the attribute enhancer. It's something that's been discussed in stuff like podcasts and forum posts and things like that before. One thing to note, of course, Plex is very expensive at the moment, so not a lot of new skill point farm characters will be made up, which gives us that pattern as well. And if that is the reason why these implants are so low, these might just be like a 6-month investment. Buy some on the cheap now, wait for Plex to go back very low, wait for a big sale on something like the multiple pilot training certificate, watch demand for these +4, +5s especially go back up substantially as people are rushing to create new skill point farm characters, and that is where you could make a nice trade on that. So honestly, when it comes to those implants, if you're still looking for that investment, there is a big risk to that. That's the CCP factor, but that is where I would make the trades, and that is probably the logic that I would follow. Look for some cheap +5s, stock a little bit on those, wait for plex to crash, wait for a sale on the multiple buyer trading certificate, watch the month go back up, and try to make the sale at that point. But yeah, the CCP factor, something to keep in mind. So interesting, implants seem to be trading on average a little bit below average. That's gonna be it for this week's ETH Talk, guys. No crashes, wood. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.